am on my way to Dragoncon. This is my 5th year going, I think, and I'm just as excited as ever. I have a robot for each of the 2 days of robot events. I have my 1-pounder F1 third after my new 1-pounder didn't quite work out the way I wanted it to. And you might be able to see my other one behind me here. That's Florida Bot for the larger robot battles. And it is literally the epitome of all things Florida. It's a meth-addicted alligator with a Mickey Mouse hat and a pink flamingo and all kinds of other garbage. So, yeah, that's going to be competing on Monday morning. So right now it's Thursday when I'm heading up. I thought I was getting a head start and getting in there, you know, as the con was starting. But I saw even last night people were starting to have some fun. There was a bunch of like inflatable T-Rexes partying in the lobby of the Hilton. So I already feel like I'm missing out on the chaos. But I am so ready to get in there and have a good time. And I have a pretty packed schedule if I follow the things that I'm planning to do. We're on our way.
And the list goes on.
Also, we've got the battle for Chinese bragging rights. All the way from Shanghai, Railgun Max is here. They're facing off against another bot from the People's Republic, Wanbu. And both these teams are in certain...
Today we're doing an event report for Robot Battles 68, held in Atlanta, Georgia at Dragoncon over September 1st and 2nd, 2019. And while it looks like you're kind of staring at a pile of trash here, this is actually the 2 robots I brought to the event. F1 third right here up on top, and then the rest of this mess is Florida Bot, my 12-pounder. So F1 third was a last-minute replacement, as it kind of tends to be. I never really go to an event intending to fight with it, but it always seems to be what ends up going into the arena. I had originally hoped to bring this guy here, Seance, my new 1-pounder, full body spinner. Really excited about it. Couldn't quite get it to work the way I needed it to in order to bring it to a competition. So in like 2 days, I slapped this thing back together. And the only real difference over last time is I redid the motor mounts. The original motor mounts were like 3D printed out of PLA, and then I put wood screws into it, and it was just kind of a mess. This is my first time using threaded inserts. I printed them out of ABS this time, and I used some threaded inserts with a 440 screw size, and I gotta say, those worked really well. I was really happy with how those operated, and now I understand why so many other people use them. The other big difference was this guy down here. Instead of the Lexan wedge it usually has, I did make a aluminum wedge. This is just made out of scrap I had lying around. But I sat outside, was working really hard to get that file down to a very sharp point. I was basically just sitting there with a sander for, it felt like forever. Probably wasn't nearly as long as I thought it was, but it felt like it was a long time sitting there sanding it to get a nice sharp edge on that. Florida Bot is basically F13 repurposed. Kind of ironic. F13 was based off of the Friday the 13th movies, so I had the machete, all that stuff. But also in the Friday the 13th movies, Jason is basically a zombie that comes back over and over again, and no matter what happens to it, it just kind of takes some new form and comes back to torture people. And it's kind of what this bot is. It's been F13, it's been the Florida Pool Noodle Massacre, and now it's basically been Florida Bot. I'll throw in some images here of what it actually looked like going into the competition, but as you can see, it's kind of come apart. So we'll go ahead and start with the fights of F1 third. The ant-weight field at Robot Battles was pretty small this year. Honestly, the insects total weren't nearly as bad as they've been in previous years. There used to be a lot, and I don't know what it was this year that kind of prevented quite so many from showing up, but it was not nearly as chaotic of a bracket as it had been in previous years. And because of the small field size and the uneven field size, F1 third ended up getting a bye for the first round. So I didn't get to compete until the second round of fights. Its first matchup was against a robot called Death Wish. A really cool design using 3 Omni wheels. It meant to be kind of a thwack bot of its own, except using a much more interesting design than F1 third does. So as the fight started, all I was able to do was crab walk. My left wheel was completely non-functional, and I wasn't even able to use the thwacking motion with the knife, so I kind of crab walked my way around the arena. But Deathwish also wasn't really too mobile, I think more by design of how it is, Once it started getting up to speed, it went quickly, but as soon as F1/3 hit into it, it kind of slowed down quite a bit. Eventually, the wedge loosened up, and I started actually being able to thwack the knife a little bit, but I was still just crab walking and not really able to get much ground across the arena. Eventually, I kind of ended up very, very close to the pit and was really worried I was going to send myself out with my crab walking, so I started crab walking smarter. I guess that's the only thing I could say. I paid a little more attention to what I was doing, was able to get some forward motion, was able to kind of head towards Death Wish. And eventually he kind of wandered over by the pit, and I don't remember, and my video doesn't show it. I'm not sure if I actually hit him and pushed him out. I think he kind of drove himself out of the pit, but I did win by a ring out. So coming out of that fight, no real damage to the robot itself, outside of the fact that the one side of drive would not work. I had actually postponed the match originally, went back to the pits, I thought I fixed the problem, and then it just still would not work. The one side, somewhere in between walking from my pit table to the stage, would just stop working. So I just went ahead with the fight for this one, but I tried to fix it when I went back to the pits and still couldn't find what it was. All the connections seemed solid. My second fight was up against Cobalt, which is a lifter. I believe it was originally supposed to be a clamping lifter, but there was no weight for the clamping mechanism. And I put F1/3 in the arena for this fight, and once again, the one-sided drive would not work. So knowing that it had worked in the pits, I basically just started smacking the robot around a little bit, and eventually I could see the ESC light up, and I got my one-sided drive back. But even with the one-sided drive, I now had my wedge just digging into the floor, really ruining my ability to move forward at a high speed. Ended up looking like I got stuck under the arena bumper at one point, and then every single time I got under Cobalt, I basically ground to a complete stop because the wedge was getting pushed into the floor, and I just had no ability to move forward. My wheels were just spinning in place. I did have a little bit of thwacking power, but not much. Eventually, he started spinning me around on top of him, but then threw himself out of the pit. So I got another win. So because that fight was so short and the one-sided drive was still functioning, and also because my opponent was ready, decided to go straight ahead into the finals instead of wasting any additional time. So I literally just picked F1/3 up out of the arena, walked across to the stage, and threw it in the other arena where my opponent was waiting. This was Deku Mark II, which was a wedge bot with a little kind of wire attachment to the front of it to allow it to have really low ground clearance. My memory of this fight was that it was much more two-sided than it really was. Looking back, the beginning of it was a lot of Deku Mark II getting under F1/3. Was having a real hard time getting any ground on him at all. Eventually, he pushed me into the wall and then kind of got F1/3 stuck on top of him, just leaving me in a state where I really couldn't do anything. The knife was on one side of the floor, the wedge was on top of his bot, and I was just completely stuck, and it was pretty frustrating to not be able to do anything. He eventually capitalized on it by being able to push me almost entirely into the pit from the opposite side of the arena. And I was just sitting there on the edge with my wheels spinning full speed reverse, hoping I'd catch something and be able to get myself out of there. And then fortunately, he couldn't maneuver me in without going out himself, so I was able to get free. Once I was free, I was able to get under him a little bit, and it was a little more of a two-sided fight, but he was still pretty dominant in being able to get under F1/3. With the driving problems F1/3 was having, it was just really hard to gain any ground because it was just very slow and not maneuverable, and I couldn't even use the thwacking power to just add to the show. So the fight went the full 3 minutes and went to a judge's decision, and Deku Mark II won that decision. Completely earned, definitely deserved that win. It was very interesting. We both seemed to have a really even time getting under one another, even going head to head. Sometimes we'd face off and my wedge would go right under his little forks. Other times those forks would go right under F1/3. So despite getting 2 wins and making it to the finals, which I think is the shortest number of wins I've ever had to get to a finals match, I was disappointed with how F1/3 was driving. With that wedge on there, it just kind of threw everything off, and it really wasn't thwacking the way I wanted it to. And, having a wedge that works is fine, but it's boring, and the way the wedge was digging into the floor, it really made the robot slow, and this thing runs off 4S, and it's usually pretty zippy, as you might have seen in some of the other videos when it had a Lexan wedge. So, because the Rumble's not really for anything other than fun, I decided to go ahead and just take the wedge off. I didn't have any Lexan or any spare wedge to put on there, so I was just going to run it with the UHMW forks, and let it actually fight as a Thwackbot. As usual, Rumbles are such chaos, I can't offer much effective commentary here. I was very happy to be able to move at a much faster pace and actually be able to get across the arena in a timely manner. I ended up going against a vertical spinner whose name escapes me, and I got him from the side and was able to corral him into the wall using the front forks, but then went head-to-head with him, and he ripped my top armor and most of the guts out of the robot. So F1/3 was just sitting dead. It got pushed to the other side of the arena to just sit in a corner and do nothing. And I just got to spend the rest of the Rumble watching and hoping that no spinner would come over and decide to turn my batteries into little miniature fires. It was a very fun Rumble, though. Everybody was just bouncing off the walls. A lot of bots stayed active for quite a while, and it was just a blast. So that was not one of my better decisions. It was fun, though. It was definitely fun. And on the plus side, the hits unplugged my battery, so I didn't have to worry about anything shorting out and causing a fire. So one of my ESCs was completely cut off. Not sure if that's going to be repairable. This one looks like it should still be okay. It has all the wires still in it, so at least should have one. I think the drive motors are probably fine. The batteries are probably fine. The receiver, let's see. I don't know. It might be all right. Really haven't tested it yet. I have to resolder it to even try it, so I can't really do it right now on film. But I think mostly it's intact, or repairable at least, but I really don't want to focus that much more energy into this bot. This has just kind of been my perpetual backup bot, and it does well, but I don't really want to do well with this robot. I want to do poorly with a robot I'm proud of, rather than just kind of win with something that I don't really give that much of a crap about. So really, I'm going to focus trying to get Seance up and running. Hopefully I won't be bringing F1/3 back out anytime in the near future, but we've seen how that's gone so far. So FloridaBot was actually supposed to be a brand new ground up robot, and then when I started designing out how it was going to work, I realized that most of the parts I was going to make was just recreating F13, so I might as well just use that old chassis. The wiring was still all intact. I just made sure everything was clean and not going to short or do anything stupid. So honestly, it was really easy to throw together. I printed out a new battery box because that was pretty beat up. I added on these little license plates here to the front to be wedges. I 3D printed a mount here in the middle to hold a PVC pipe that in turn held up the alligator and the flamingo, and there was a wooden stick out the back with a caster on the end of it to kind of stabilize everything. So I put this in the arena beforehand, or not really the arena, I put it on the stage and did a little test drive, and everything seemed to work really well. I was kind of afraid that it would maybe not function, it would get caught on the seams really badly, especially with these little license plates on the front, but it seemed to have decent clearance. It bounced just the right amount to not really be too squirrely, and I thought everything was going to be good. So a couple interesting notes about where I was in the pits for this event. At the pit table to my right was Charles from Overhaul with his meme bot for the year, Your Waifu is Trash, which is basically not literally a dumpster fire, but as close as you could get without being allowed to have a flamethrower. It's a dumpster fire. So I think our little section of the pits was probably one of the more photographed ones between this monstrosity and his robot, which took considerably more effort than I think mine did. So he might have had the robot that looked like a trash can, but I had the literal trash on my robot. And then the pit table to my left was my first opponent for the day, Lift Lord. I think he described it as an Uberclocker clone, so it has kind of a jaw mechanism. The upper jaw was not working for our fight, so it's really just a lifter. So the tabletop battles are best of 3. So first round, we kind of went both head to head. Everything seemed to be working well. I was able to get under him, was able to push him, and then one of the license plates came off and got kind of jammed under the robot. Then the other license plate got jammed under the floor of the arena. I was able to get free. I almost got him across the ring and out, and then everything started falling off, including the alligator and the second license plate, but I kept pushing him, and we both went off, which is a draw, not a win, so we both had to go collect our robots and get him back in there. At this state, Florida Bot had pretty much nothing. It was just the box of F-13 with some stuff dangling off the back end of it. We ended up throwing all the random parts back on the stage and just kind of letting it go. This time I had no wedges. All I could do was just push with a flat front of the robot. So I just kept trying to get around to the side of him, but eventually the top plate of wood I was using cracked and just flew off the robot, exposing all my guts. So I started trying to act like a thwack bot, and then he kind of missed me and fell off the stage, giving me the first point of the match. Kelly asked me, I don't know if he was entirely serious, if I needed time to go repair the robot. And I just kind of asked if I could borrow some of the Gorilla Tape he keeps to kind of patch down the seams of the ring. So he helped me Gorilla Tape the wood back onto the top of the robot and also tape the alligator back on as well. He said he drew the line of the flamingo. But this at least gives me the important parts. The parts that move, the parts that cover the inside, and the stupid meth-addicted alligator on top. Round 3 started and we both shot off across the arena again. Just started kind of smacking into each other. Me once again trying to figure out what to do without a weapon. But then the back end of the robot fell off the stage and the caster caught on the edge of the stage. And once that happened, I really had nothing I could do. I could not go forward. I couldn't free the caster, and all I could do was just go off the edge of the ring and fall, giving Lift Lord the second point of the match. So we were now in sudden death. I once again tried to be a thwack bot, very unsuccessfully. I kind of got hung up on the floor a little bit somehow and just drove kind of aimlessly. I really didn't have much of a plan at this point. And then he eventually kind of corralled me in the jaws and got me very close to the edge of the stage. And then when I tried to go back and hit him again, I kind of flung myself off, giving me the loss for the round. So, after the briefest moment of hope, it looks like Florida Bot was not going to be walking away with a win at this event. Can't say I didn't expect it, but I thought maybe I could get somebody out of the arena. And seeing this is one of the first fights of the day, I think it was like the second or third fight of the day, I had a lot of time to just take the robot back to the pits, figure out what I was going to do for the Rumble. Originally, I was going to kind of just leave it how it was sitting. I was just going to let the gator stay taped to the top of the robot. Then I kind of zip tied on the flamingo onto the gator's back. Then I removed the tape from the front of the gator and just zip tied him to the tail part of the robot itself so that when I started moving, the gator would flail around and just make a mess. And eventually I realized I could actually put the license plates back on if I added some kind of washer. I didn't bring any washers with me, but I did bring plenty of zip ties. So I actually made little zip tie washers to help keep the license plates onto the front of the robot. I did this better on one side than I did on the other, and you will see in the footage exactly what I mean by that. Another Rumble, even more chaos. I kind of just got in the giant pileup in the middle of the ring at the beginning, and then stuff started falling off the robot again. I kept getting caught on the seams in the floor while trying to push people around. Ended up fighting Lift Lord again, and then I got high-centered on all my extra crap. The alligator and the flamingo got under Florida Bot and I wasn't able to move. Eventually they were detached from the robot and I was able to kind of move around freely. I started acting like a thwack bot again because what else do I do when I don't know what else I could actually do in a fight? One of the license plates started coming off and I just continued to try to hit whatever was in my way. Eventually one of the license plates did come off completely and then I drove mostly off the stage and was totally high-centered and Flapjack came over and finished it off. So, that was how that went. I am a little disappointed because there were two robots on the field that I really wanted to at least hit once, and I didn't get to either of them, I don't believe. I wanted to hit Charles's dumpster bot, and I wanted to hit the cat litter box, which is what inspired this thing. Seeing that robot last year made me realize I had to step up the level of stupid for my entry for 2019, and that was definitely the direct inspiration to make Florida Bot. So, lessons learned. I don't know if I'm going to bring this robot back ever again. Before I got to the event, I probably would have told you it was a one-year thing and it was going to be done. But man, I already kind of want to figure out a way to make it just a little bit more competitive, but still equally stupid and bring it back next year. So I guess we'll see. Top armor being wood, bad idea. Doesn't really stay on that well. Should have just made it out of Lexan or something like I originally planned. Definitely need to put some washers on the front. Honestly, these license plates are pretty trash. but they're probably fine. They'll just rebend them. They'll be all right. I think they're really the most beat up just from being thrown around the stage by the other robots after they came off. The Flamingo is in relatively decent shape. Definitely has some skid marks on him, but it's fine. Gator, totally fine. Still has a meth problem, but he's good. Mickey Mouse ears held up. A little bit of ripping on the top of the hat, but that's pretty minor. So those things are still good to go. The frame, the electronics, all that's still good. It's just that top part that's really beat up. And then this stupid 3D printed mount for the PVC part, which I kind of knew was a bad idea to begin with. The initial time I printed it vertically. And I think that would have made more sense because then the layer lines were going in the proper direction to allow it to kind of hold up a little more. And I had originally done it with a really low infill, and I had some problems just mounting it on the robot itself. This one was printed at 100% infill, but because I printed it flat, the layer lines were set up so that it would just break right along the axis where it needed to be strong. So I think if I was going to do it again, I would just print it in the proper orientation or find some other method that wasn't going to be so trash. So every time I film one of these event report videos, I always try to put the robots in interesting, cool visual ways on the table to show them off, but there's no saving this right now. It just looks like a pile of trash. That's okay though. This event was great. It's been almost a year since I competed. Maker Faire Orlando last October was the last event I went to, and it just so happened that I wasn't ready for Small Box Mass Destruction earlier in the year. Some of the other ones that I usually go to, I either just didn't have the time to travel to or just wasn't ready for, to be quite honest, because without direct motivation of I need to have robots done tomorrow, I do tend to procrastinate quite a bit. So yeah, I missed competing. I missed doing these event report videos. I missed all of it. And I gotta say, Dragoncon Robot Battles is a good one to come back on. Just a fun time. Dragoncon in and of itself is the most fun time you'll ever have, being stressed to extreme levels. It was really good. Great to see everybody, all the regulars and the new people and all that fun stuff. There's always crazy designs. People really seem to be stepping it up this year. I saw a lot of robots using kind of different stuff. Omni-wheel robots, and pneumatic flipper was in the 30-pounders, and just some really cool stuff that's bringing a nice variety to everything and really helping it be different. It's not a bunch of wedges, especially robot battles where, it lends itself to wedges. That's really kind of the easiest thing to build, and there's not as much pressure to put any active weapon on it because you can't do too much with it. You can't have a spinner. Well, you can have a really slow spinner, but there's less motivation to do that kind of stuff. But it's great to see that people are still trying to step it up and do something different, do something unique, or just do something funny. And the event ran really smooth. In previous years, there's been a lot more robots, so I think that kind of contributed, but it kind of just felt like chaos at times. And this year it really didn't. It felt like everything moved at a good pace. There were exciting fights. It was fun to watch. And then, it was over and done with, and the audience seemed to enjoy themselves. Can't really ask for a whole lot more than that. So thank you to Kelly and all the other volunteers that put on robot battles. And the other thing about this event is it's not like a typical, we have a space for a day or a couple days we're going to run an event. This is, we have this space for a couple hours, and then everything's got to be out because something else is happening in this space this afternoon. So I don't know. I was thinking about it earlier today that there's some people that I heard from that have only ever done robot battles. They haven't fought in any of the robot tournaments. And I would imagine it would be a complete culture shock to go to a more normal kind of robot combat event, because it definitely has a very different feel to it, both in terms of attitude and in terms of schedule. On the reverse side, anybody who just does normal robot combat events, I recommend checking this one out for sure, because it's a bit of a different time, but it's definitely fun. So I already can't wait for next year. I'm already thinking of dumb things for next year. But as for what's next, well, unfortunately, the next Robot Combat event I'm not gonna make. Maker Faire Orlando, there's no practical way I could compete in that, and I don't think there's registration available at the moment. I don't know if any of the weight classes have openings, so I couldn't even sign up if I wanted to, if my plans fell through. video. So next I'm looking at I think it's technically a Battle Beach event being held, I think, near Orlando in December. Also, unfortunately the ant waits filled up before I could register a bot, so I can't even bring Seance. So I'm still going to keep working on that, but it may not get to compete until 2020. So I did sign up Son of Gorgor, who I'm planning to do some rebuilds on, and Demon Spawn, who I guess is probably still functional from last year, but I'm kind of thinking I might do some redesigns. I'm not 100% sure yet, and I guess it'll probably come down to how much time I have to work on it in between now and then. But I think that about wraps this up. I do also want to plug that I do have a Facebook page and a Instagram page that I use for the team being me and I guess this alligator now. So if you do want to see more up-to-date current things without me having to make a video on it, you can go check me out there. I have links in the description. Now should be on all new videos. They'll have both links there. So if you want to go check that out, give me a follow on those platforms. And until next time, I'll see you later.